A bedroom sealed for 100 years, where a World War I soldier's life is still sitting exactly where he left it. A gold-covered mummy locked underground for 4,300 years, and a cave so untouched, it still feels like the people who placed those objects never really left. These are mysterious objects found in places that were sealed for decades. In 1918, a French soldier named Hubert Rochereau was killed in action during World War I. His parents were so devastated by the loss that they turned his bedroom into a shrine, and they wanted it to stay that way forever. So eventually, they just bricked up the door, and the room stayed sealed behind that wall for 102 years. When it was finally opened, it was like stepping straight into another time. Everything was, and still is, by the way, exactly where Hubert left it. His pipe is still sitting on his desk next to a tin of tobacco, and his old books are lined up on the shelves. His military uniform and medals are still hanging up, just buried under a century of thick dust. Their parents had sold the place in 1935, but they added a clause to the contract. The room wasn't to be touched for 500 years, and every person who's owned the home since has respected the parents' wish and left the room alone. The current owner, Laurent Laroche, treats the space with a lot of weight, saying, quote, "It's not a museum, it's a place where someone lived and who's still there in some way. He was a young man who died for his country, and his parents wanted to keep his memory alive." A few years ago, about 50 feet down a shaft in the Saqqara graveyard, a team of archaeologists found a massive 45-ton limestone coffin that had been sealed shut with mortar for 4,300 years. It was completely untouched. Looters never even smelled the place. When they finally opened it, they found a mummy named Cachepus. The guy was literally head to toe in gold leaf. It's pretty rare to find an old kingdom mummy that hasn't been picked clean by grave robbers, let alone one this well preserved. They also found tombs for other big names nearby, including a guy whose actual job title was Keeper of Secrets. Zahi Owas, who was leading the dig, talked about sticking his head into the coffin for the first time, saying, "I put my head inside to see what was inside the sarcophagus, a beautiful mummy of a man completely covered in layers of gold." He also mentioned that this, quote, "may be the oldest and most complete mummy found in Egypt to date." Back in 1966, a group of farmers in the Yucatan told an archaeologist named Victor Segovia Pinto about a cave they'd found. Segovia checked it out, realized it was packed with ancient artifacts, and then just shut it down. He had the entrance sealed with rocks and basically wiped the discovery from the official records. For over 50 years, the cave stayed hidden under the jungle floor. It wasn't until 2019 that Guillermo Dianda and his team tracked it down. To get inside, they had to crawl on their stomachs through cramped tunnels full of freezing mud for hours. Eventually reached a series of chambers that hadn't been touched in about 1,000 years. The place is called Balamku, the Cave of the Jaguar God. It's a massive underground time capsule. There are over 150 items in there, mostly incense burners and ritual plates. A lot of these burners have the face of a god named Tlaloc on them, which is pretty interesting because Tlaloc was a rain god from central Mexico, hundreds of miles away from this Maya site. Maya didn't just toss these things in a pile either. They carefully wedged them into rock crevices or placed them around the stalagmites. Archaeologists think they did this during a massive drought, dragging these heavy ceramic pots through miles of tight, muddy tunnels as a last-ditch effort for water. When Dianda finally broke through into the main chamber, he was overwhelmed, saying, quote, "I couldn't speak, I started to cry. I've analyzed human remains in Chichen Itza's sacred cenote, but nothing compares to the sensation I had entering alone for the first time in that cave," end quote. In 1994, 3 speleologists led by Jean-Marie Chauvet were poking around the cliffs of southern France when they felt a weird, faint draft coming from a pile of rocks. They cleared some space, squeezed through a tight passage, and ended up dropping into this massive chamber that had been completely cut off from the world for 30,000 years. The floor was covered in bones and skulls of extinct cave bears, and not only that, the walls were covered in hundreds of paintings of lions, rhinos, and mammoths. The artists actually used the humps and curves of the cave walls to make the animals look more three-dimensional. Because a landslide had sealed the entrance so perfectly, the cave was a total vacuum. There were even footprints from a young child and a wolf preserved in the clay floor. looking like they'd been stepped in just hours before the explorers arrived. Jean-Marie Chauvet said the light of our lamps fell on a giant mammoth drawn in red ochre on a rocky pendant. We were gripped by a strange feeling. Everything was so beautiful, so fresh, almost too much so. The Great Pyramid of Giza is famously empty, but in 1872 a British engineer named Wayneman Dixon was poking around the Queen's chamber when he found 3 specific items stashed in a shaft that had been sealed for thousands of years. These are the Dixon Relics, a bronze hook, a stone ball, and some small fragments of cedar wood. While the first 2 ended up in a museum, the wood just disappeared for over a century. Turns out the wood had been passed around until it ended up at the University of Aberdeen, where it was lost in their massive archives. In 2019, a woman named Abir Eldani, an Egyptian archaeologist, is from roughly 3341 to 3094 BCE, which is actually hundreds of years older than most people think the pyramid is. Curtis, the museum head, said the university's collections are vast, running to hundreds of thousands of items, so looking for it has been like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Eldani was stunned by the luck of it too, saying, "I'm an archaeologist and have worked on digs in Egypt, but I never imagined it would be here in northeast Scotland. I would find something so important to the heritage of my own country." In 2022, in the Polish village of Barczesko, archaeologists were poking around the ruins of a 14th century church when they found a bricked up tunnel that had been sealed off for ages. The church was destroyed during a war in 1354, and since then, the entrance had been completely hidden underground. When they finally broke through the blockage, they found a small vaulted crypt, and inside the cramped space, they discovered the remains of 2 people. But the real mystery was the pile of silver coins scattered around them, thin, one-sided coins that were common in the Middle Ages. It was clear that someone was desperately trying to hide their wealth before the church was leveled. The coins and the skeletons were left exactly as they fell hundreds of years ago. Deep in a Polish forest, a group of amateur historians was poking around the ruins of a massive military compound known as the Wolf's Lair. This was the ultra-secure forest fortress where the leader of the Third Reich, the guy with the famous tiny mustache, spent most of his time during the 40s. After scanning the dirt under what used to be the floor of Hermann Göring's private villa, the team dug down and found 5 skeletons buried just inches below where the floorboards would have been. There were 3 adults and 2 younger people, and all of them were missing their hands and feet. Now, because of some delightfully strict platform rules that treat certain historical words like Voldemort for some reason, we can't name the specific political party or their leader, but I think you all know who I'm talking about. And the fact that 5 people were buried under the house of the second in command of that regime is disturbing, but not really all that surprising. The bodies actually predated the Third Reich though, so the team actually believes they may have had a possible connection to occult practices, which, as many of you probably know, the regime partly spawned out of and remained interested in throughout their reign. The Crypt of Civilization is this giant time capsule built with one goal in mind: outlast all of us. It's meant to stay sealed for over 6,000 years, not opening until the year 8113. It was locked up back in 1940 at Oglethorpe University by a historian named Thornwell Jacobs, who got the idea after people started cracking open ancient sites like the Egyptian pyramids. He basically thought, why not leave something behind for whoever's around thousands of years from now? So inside the vault is a little bit of everything from the time, stuff meant to show what everyday life looked like in the early 1900s. Books, films, typewriters, sewing machines, cash registers. They also packed in audio recordings of speeches and radio broadcasts, figuring future people might be curious about how we sounded, how we talked. Now, what's funny, obviously, in hindsight, is they had no clue the internet was coming, so all that effort to preserve information, and now most of it already exists in the digital realm. But then again, 6,000 years, it's a long time, a lot can change. No one knows who or even what will be around by then. For all we know, everything we've built could be wiped out, and the vault ends up being one of the only things left behind. Well, that's been the video for today. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, next time.